From the outside, Nicole Kidman and Keith Urban have long looked like one of the rare celebrity couples who somehow escaped the curse of fame. Red carpet smiles, soft glances, hands held just a little longer than expected, they built an image that felt almost too polished to question. For years, fans wanted to believe that what they were seeing was real, that behind the cameras was the same warmth, the same loyalty, the same deep connection. But sometimes the most revealing truth is not hidden in what people say. It is hidden in what one person has quietly known all along. And now, many who have watched this marriage for years believe Nicole may have just confirmed the suspicion she has carried for far longer than anyone realized. Not with a dramatic statement, not with some explosive interview, but with the kind of subtle shift that only becomes obvious when people stop looking at the headlines and start looking at the pattern. Because if there is one thing Nicole Kidman has always been known for, it is control. She does not move carelessly. She does not reveal more than she wants to. Every appearance, every comment, every silence has a purpose. That is why recent moments surrounding Keith Urban have begun to feel different to so many observers. Not louder, just colder, more measured, more distant. As if Nicole is no longer trying to protect an illusion she once worked hard to preserve. For years, there were whispers that Nicole understood Keith better than the public ever could. She knew his vulnerabilities, his struggles, his need for reassurance, his ability to charm a room while keeping certain emotions out of reach. She stood by him through the difficult chapters, defended the relationship when outsiders doubted it, and helped shape the narrative of a love story that survived what should have broken it. But what if surviving was never the same as healing? What if Nicole always knew that some parts of Keith would never fully change, no matter how much love surrounded him? That is what makes this story so unsettling. It is not the idea of one shocking betrayal. It is the possibility that Nicole has been living with a truth she recognized from the very beginning, a truth that time did not erase, but only confirmed. And if that is really what is happening now, then what the world is witnessing is not the sudden collapse of a perfect marriage. It is the slow unveiling of something Nicole may have understood all along, and something far more painful than anyone wanted to imagine. The reason this possibility hits so hard is because Nicole and Keith were never sold to the public as chaotic or reckless. They were sold as tested, as proven, as mature enough to outlast the scandals, the pressures, the temptations, and the emotional storms that destroy so many Hollywood relationships. Their love story was not supposed to be fragile. It was supposed to be the exception. That is exactly why every small crack now feels bigger than it should. What people are starting to notice is not one headline or one awkward moment. It is the accumulation, the subtle changes in body language, the carefully chosen words. The sense that Nicole has become more guarded whenever Keith enters the conversation, as though she is balancing honesty against the burden of protecting what remains. That kind of restraint does not usually come from nowhere. It comes from experience. It comes from disappointment that is no longer fresh enough to explode, but too deep to ignore. And that may be the most heartbreaking part of all. If Nicole truly always knew this side of Keith was there, then her pain may not come from discovery. It may come from confirmation. There is a cruel difference between fearing something and finally realizing you were right to fear it. One keeps you restless, the other leaves you empty. And for someone as composed as Nicole, emptiness may be far more visible than anger. For a long time, she may have believed that love, patience, and loyalty could hold the center together. She may have believed that whatever darkness or distance Keith carried inside himself could be softened by the life they built. Their home, their children, their shared public image, all of it may have served as evidence that the fight had been worth it. But when the same emotional patterns return again and again, even the strongest person begins to understand that endurance has a cost. That is why some insiders and longtime fans are re-examining the entire relationship now with new eyes. They are asking whether Nicole's famous calm was never proof that everything was fine. Maybe it was proof that she had learned how to survive in a reality she could not fully fix. Maybe she had already accepted long ago that loving Keith also meant living beside uncertainties the public would never understand. And if that is true, then this is no longer just a story about a celebrity marriage under pressure. It becomes the story of a woman who may have spent years carrying a truth too painful to name out loud, until it finally became impossible to hide behind the image anymore. What makes the situation even more disturbing is that Keith Urban has always inspired two very different reactions at the same time. To the public, he often appears warm, humble, talented, and emotionally open in a way that feels disarming. He knows how to make people feel comfortable. He knows how to keep the spotlight soft. And perhaps most importantly, he knows how to appear deeply grateful for the life he has built. But behind that polished image, there has always been a lingering question that never fully went away. Was Nicole seeing a version of Keith the public never truly understood? That is where this story begins to shift from rumor into something far more psychologically painful. Because the worst truths in a marriage are not always loud. They are often repetitive, quiet, familiar. A look that says more than a confession. A silence that lands harder than an argument. A pattern that returns just when you thought it had finally disappeared. If Nicole has been facing that kind of cycle for years, then what people are noticing now may not be a new crisis at all. It may be the exhaustion that comes after too many second chances, and that possibility changes everything. It suggests that Nicole may not be reacting to one event, one mistake, or one betrayal. She may be reacting to the crushing realization that some people do not change in the ways we desperately hope they will. They improve, they promise, they try, they even mean well for a time, but eventually they drift back toward the same emotional absences, the same unresolved weight, the same private struggles that make true closeness impossible. If that is the truth Nicole has always known about Keith, then the tragedy is not simply what he did or did not do. The tragedy is that she may have loved him while knowing, deep down, that one part of him would always remain unreachable. That is why recent attention around them feels so intense. People are not just watching a glamorous couple go through a rough season. They are watching the possibility that Nicole's strength has come from carrying an unbearable emotional burden with grace. And when a woman like Nicole stops hiding that burden as carefully as she once did, others begin to suspect that the reality behind the scenes is much heavier than anyone was prepared to believe. In the end, the most painful part may be this. Nicole Kidman may not be shocked by what is happening now. She may simply be living through the moment she hoped would never come, the moment when what she always knew could no longer be denied. There is also something especially cruel about the way long marriages are judged from the outside. The longer a couple stays together, the more people assume the hardest truths must have already been conquered. Time itself becomes evidence. Years become proof. Shared appearances become reassurance. And in Nicole and Keith's case, that illusion may have become one of the heaviest burdens of all. Because once the world decides your marriage is a success story, you are no longer just protecting a relationship. You are protecting a legend. That kind of pressure can keep people silent far longer than they ever imagined possible. Not because they are weak, but because speaking honestly would shatter more than headlines. It would force them to admit that the story everyone admired was never quite as whole as it seemed. For Nicole, that may be the deepest heartbreak. Not simply that something painful has followed them through the years, but that she may have had to smile beside it, explain around it, and carry it without ever being allowed to fully set it down. And when people say it is worse than anyone thought, this may be what they really mean. Not that some shocking secret has suddenly appeared, but that the emotional cost may have been ongoing, private, and far more isolating than the public ever understood. There is a special loneliness in realizing that the person you love can still leave you emotionally alone, even while standing right beside you. That kind of loneliness does not always destroy a marriage overnight. Sometimes it settles in slowly, becoming part of daily life, until one day the weight of it can no longer be disguised. Nicole has always projected intelligence, discipline, and emotional depth. She is not the kind of woman people imagine being easily deceived for long, which makes this theory so painful to consider. Maybe she was never deceived at all. Maybe she saw the warning signs early. Maybe she recognized the fragility beneath Keith's charm, the instability beneath the tenderness, the emotional distance beneath the devotion. And maybe what we are seeing now is the result of years spent hoping that insight would somehow prove wrong. If so, then Nicole's greatest sorrow may not be that Keith became someone different. It may be that he stayed, in one essential way, exactly who she feared he was. And if that is the truth finally surfacing, then the public is not watching a sudden tragedy unfold. They are watching the slow and painful confirmation of a reality Nicole may have been trying, for years, not to believe. And perhaps that is why this story has started to resonate far beyond ordinary celebrity gossip. People are not only reacting to Nicole Kidman and Keith Urban as famous names, they are reacting to a fear many understand too well. The fear of standing beside someone for years, loving them deeply, defending them publicly, building a life around them, only to realize that the one truth you tried hardest to outrun was quietly waiting for you the entire time. That is what gives this narrative its emotional force. It is not built on scandal alone. It is built on recognition. The recognition that sometimes the most devastating moment in a relationship is not the beginning of the problem. It is the moment when you finally stop telling yourself the problem is temporary. For Nicole, if this reading is even close to the truth, then what makes it worse than anyone thought is not that she suddenly discovered something dark about Keith. It is that she may have spent years carrying the knowledge that one day this exact emotional reckoning could arrive. And there is something tragic about how invisible that kind of suffering can be. A woman can smile at award shows. She can speak lovingly in interviews. She can appear composed, elegant, and grateful. She can do everything expected of her while privately wrestling with disappointment that has no clean language. Because what do you call it when someone does not completely fail you, but never fully gives you the safety you need either? What do you call it when love survives, but peace does not? That question may sit at the center of everything now. Nicole may have known that Keith's most difficult battles were never only the ones the world could see. The deeper struggle may have been emotional inconsistency, the kind that leaves a partner always adjusting, always interpreting, always hoping. And when a marriage becomes a place where one person is constantly holding the emotional structure together, exhaustion is inevitable. Even loyalty begins to feel less like devotion and more like endurance. So when people look at Nicole now and sense that something has shifted, they may be responding to that exhaustion. Not rage, not chaos. Just the quiet heaviness of a woman who may have reached the point where protecting the story hurts more than facing the truth. If that is where this is heading, then the saddest part is no longer whether she was right about Keith all along. The saddest part is how long she may have lived with that knowledge before the rest of the world started to notice. What happens next may depend on something far more painful than public opinion. It may depend on whether Nicole Kidman has finally reached the emotional limit of what she can carry in silence. Because there comes a point in every strained relationship when the question is no longer whether love exists. The question becomes whether love is enough to keep absorbing the same wound over and over again. And if Nicole has arrived at that point, then what the public is seeing now may be the beginning of a truth she can no longer soften for anyone, including herself. That is what makes this chapter feel so different from the usual celebrity speculation. There is no need for some explosive confession to sense that the emotional weather has changed. Sometimes the strongest signal is restraint, a colder distance, a more careful tone, a look that seems tired rather than angry. Those are often the signs of someone who has already cried, already argued, already hoped, and has quietly entered the stage where acceptance feels closer than repair. If Nicole is there now, then the silence surrounding Keith may speak louder than any headline ever could. And perhaps that is the darkest possibility of all. Not that their marriage was built on a lie, but that it was built on a love strong enough to survive pain, yet not strong enough to remove it. That kind of love can last a very long time. It can even look beautiful from the outside, but inside, it asks one person to keep making peace with something that never truly heals. If Nicole has been the one making that peace for years, then her strength may have come at a devastating personal cost. For the public, this may still look like rumor, a collection of impressions, a story built from tone, timing, and subtle shifts. But for those who have lived through similar patterns, the feeling is unmistakable. They know what it means when a woman stops looking surprised by disappointment. They know what it means when composure begins to resemble resignation. And that may be why so many people believe Nicole has just revealed more than she intended. Because what they think they are seeing is not a sudden reaction to Keith Urban. It is the face of someone confronting the reality she always feared was true. If that is really what is happening, then this story was never about one moment. It was about years of intuition, loyalty, and emotional survival, leading to a single, unbearable conclusion. Nicole Kidman may have always known, and now the world may finally be catching up to what she has been carrying all along. If this really is the moment when everything Nicole Kidman once sensed is finally becoming impossible to ignore, then the emotional meaning of it is devastating. Because the hardest truth to live with is not always betrayal in the obvious sense. Sometimes it is the slow realization that the person you built your life around has never been fully capable of meeting you in the place where you needed them most. They can love you, they can admire you, they can even depend on you, but still, somehow, they leave a part of you standing alone. That may be the hidden sadness behind everything people are now reading into Nicole and Keith. Not that they lacked love, but that their love may have always carried an imbalance too painful to name. Nicole, by all appearances, became the steady one, the composed one, the one who protected the image, preserved the peace, and carried the emotional intelligence of the relationship on her shoulders. And Keith, whether intentionally or not, may have remained the one whose inner uncertainties kept casting a shadow over what should have felt secure. If that was the pattern, then Nicole's tragedy may not be that she failed to understand Keith. It may be that she understood him too well. She may have seen the fracture lines early, recognized the signs others missed, and chosen love anyway, hoping that commitment, family, time, and shared struggle would eventually transform what worried her most. But sometimes deep understanding does not save a relationship. Sometimes it only means you suffer with clearer vision than anyone around you. That idea is what makes this story cut so deeply. A woman can be strong, wise, disciplined, and still find herself trapped in the exhausting work of loving someone who never becomes emotionally safe in the way she needs. And when years pass under that strain, the pain changes form. It becomes quieter, but heavier, less dramatic, but more permanent. It no longer feels like crisis. It feels like life. Maybe that is what Nicole is confronting now. Not a shocking revelation, but a final exhaustion. The kind that settles in when hope has been asked to do too much for too long. The kind that comes when a person realizes they are no longer fighting confusion, but grieving clarity. And if that is where Nicole truly is, then what the public is sensing is not just trouble in a marriage. It is the unbearable weight of a truth she may have carried for years, finally reaching the point where it can no longer be hidden behind grace, silence, and loyalty alone.